Nyesom Wike has attacked hundreds of politicians since he entered public life. Nobody blinks. That is just Wike being Wike. That is what most Nigerians say. And most of the time, they are not wrong. But when he went after Bala Mohammed in early 2025, something happened that almost never happens when Wike throws a punch. The people he expected to back him, his own party's governors, his own political infrastructure, went quiet. Not publicly against him, not publicly with him, just quiet. And in Nigerian politics, that kind of silence is never neutral. While every analyst has been dissecting what Wike said about Bala, what he called him, what it means for PDP's internal crisis, nobody is asking the more dangerous question. Why did Wike choose this specific moment? And what does he need Bala Mohammed out of the way for? Because if you understand what Bala controls and what is actually at stake in the north going into 2027, this attack is not about Bala at all. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel exists for one reason: to give Nigerians the political analysis mainstream media is too afraid or too compromised to deliver. Hit subscribe and stay with me. This gets deeper. Let me tell you exactly what happened, and more importantly, what most of the coverage completely missed. Wike, serving as FCT minister, launched a very public and very surgical broadside against Bala Mohammed, the Bauchi state governor and one of the heaviest political weights inside PDP's northern structure. This was not a slip in an interview. It was not heat-of-the-moment aggression. It was timed, it was deliberate, and it was delivered through channels designed to generate maximum exposure and maximum pressure. The mainstream narrative wrote itself instantly. Wike versus Bala, PDP's internal crisis deepens, the party is imploding ahead of 2027. That story is not false, but it is shallow. It tells you what happened on the surface and stops exactly where the analysis should begin. Here is what almost nobody reported. In the weeks before Wike's attack, Bala Mohammed had done something quiet and significant. He publicly aligned himself with a coalition of northern governors, and this is the part that matters, including some ACP governors, around a specific set of fiscal federalism demands. Demands that directly challenge the revenue allocation framework that currently benefits FCT infrastructure budget. The same infrastructure budget that Wike, as FCT minister, controls. That is not background. That is the story. And to understand why, you need to know something about how Wike operates, because people keep misreading him. Go back to 2022. Wike's war with Atiku presidential campaign looked on the surface like a man wounded after losing the party's presidential ticket. Bitter, combative, burning down the house out of pride. That was the popular reading. But within 18 months, it was clear that what Wike had actually done was methodically dismantle a party coalition structure that was not loyal to him and extract enormous political and financial concessions from the incoming Tinubu administration in the process. He did not lose that war. He repositioned himself inside a winning architecture. That pattern is not ancient history. It is the operating manual for what you are watching right now. So let us go deeper. Let us follow the actual power logic, because this is where the story stops being about personalities and starts being about institutions, money, and 2027. Start with the FCT ministerial position itself. Most people think of it as an administrative role, managing Abuja, fixing roads, overseeing construction. What it actually is, constitutionally, is one of the most anomalous concentrations of executive power in Nigeria's federal structure. Abuja's residents have no full state rights. There is no governor to check the minister, no state house of assembly, no INEC-registered electorate that the minister must answer to. The FCT minister holds direct executive authority over land allocation, infrastructure contracts, and FCDA appointments that run into hundreds of billions of naira annually, with far less accountability than any state governor faces. Wike has spent 18 months expanding the use of that authority aggressively. Anyone watching the FCT budget lines already knows this. Now, who specifically benefits if Bala Mohammed is politically diminished? Not just Wike personally. Think structurally. If Bala's credibility as the leading northern PDP voice is successfully damaged, three things happen at the same time. The PDP's most viable northern presidential option for 2027 becomes structurally weaker. The northern governors who might rally behind Bala as a coherent power bloc lose their anchor and their most articulate spokesperson. And Wike's ability to position himself as a national political broker, the man who can deliver or deny northern PDP support to whoever emerges as a presidential candidate, increases dramatically. Wike is not running for president. That is the conventional wisdom. And on this point, the conventional wisdom is probably right. But Wike has never needed to run to win. His model is kingmaker. His model is be the decisive variable in someone else's victory and then extract maximum concessions for having been that variable. In 2023, that variable was his willingness to fracture PDP at the critical moment and effectively hand Tinubu a cleaner path. In 2027, the variable he wants to own is northern PDP. And right now, Bala Mohammed holds the keys to that block. Look at the regional dimension carefully. Bala is Hausa Fulani, Muslim, speaks the political language of the Northwest and Northeast with authenticity and credibility that cannot be manufactured. He's not easily replaced and he cannot be replicated by a Wike proxy. Which means Wike's goal here is not to install a replacement, it is to fragment. A fragmented northern PDP bloc does not produce a united candidate or a united negotiating position. It produces a group of individual governors who need a fixer to align their interests. And Wike is already auditioning loudly and publicly for that role. Now, the silence. The southern PDP governors, Obaseki, Mba, Adeleke, none of them have said a word. In previous Wike wars, governor silence meant either fear or quiet complicity. Here, it reads differently. It reads like strategic distance, watching to see whether the attack lands before choosing which side of it to stand on. That calculation tells you something important. Even Wike's natural allies are not certain this move succeeds. And then, there's the money trail. Bauchi State, Bala State, has been pushing hard for a reclassification of solid mineral resources that would redirect FAC revenue towards states that sit on those minerals and away from the current allocation formula. That formula, as it stands, heavily advantages FCT infrastructure funding. Bala has been the loudest, most persistent gubernatorial voice on this issue. He has taken it to the National Economic Council, he has put it in public statements, he has built a quiet coalition around it. If that reclassification moves forward, Wike's budget project gets smaller. That's not speculation. The National Economic Council discussed the horizontal revenue sharing review in Q4 2024 and it is not resolved. There's one specific institution that makes everything in this story legible. The Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, the RMAFC. Its membership, its configuration, and its pending review of the horizontal revenue sharing formula will determine in very concrete financial terms who wins the argument that Bala Mohammed has been making. Watch that commission very carefully, because the person with the most direct line to influence who sits on it is not in the National Assembly. We will come back to exactly what that means, and when we do, the whole picture locks into place. But here's what almost nobody has connected yet. And it changes everything.
Let us talk about what is actually at stake for ordinary Nigerians. Because this story is not just about two powerful men fighting over position. The fiscal federalism debate that Bala Mohammed has been anchoring is not abstract policy. It determines whether states like Bauchi, Gombe, and Zamfara, states that sit on enormous solid mineral wealth but receive disproportionately low federal allocations, get the resources to fund public schools, primary healthcare, rural infrastructure, and security operations. Every percentage point shifted in the horizontal revenue sharing formula is not a statistic, it is thousands of civil servant salaries. It is hospital equipment. It is the security budget that determines how many local government areas have functioning police presence. This is the real-world consequence of the fight Wike just escalated. On the federal balance question, If a serving FCT minister can successfully use political pressure to suppress the most credible opposition governor voice advocating for fiscal reform, then what you have is a federal structure where ministers effectively outrank governors, where proximity to Aso Rock matters more than constitutional formula. That is not good for Nigeria, regardless of party, regardless of region. The center gets stronger, and the states, which are where most Nigerians actually live and receive services, get weaker. On security, Bala Mohammed has been one of the few northern governors willing to speak bluntly and publicly about the inadequacy of federal military deployment in the northeast and northwest, and about the need for state-level policing powers. Removing his political relevance removes one of the more credible northern advocates for security reform at exactly the moment when banditry and insurgency are still active and still claiming lives. Now, the RMAFC. Here is what I flagged earlier, and here is what it actually means. The Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission currently has 3 vacancies on its governing board. 3. Appointments to those positions rest with the presidency. Confirmation goes through a Senate whose leadership has been, and this is documented, not alleged, very careful to maintain a close working relationship with Wike's political orbit. The RMAFC's pending horizontal revenue formula review, the exact review that Bala Mohammed has been demanding and building coalition support for, cannot proceed without a full quorum. Those 3 vacancies have been deliberately unfilled since mid-2024, not because of administrative backlog. Nigerian government moves slowly on many things, but not on appointments that serve no political interest to delay. These vacancies serve a very clear political interest to delay. And Wike, as a minister with direct and regular access to the presidency, sits closer to that appointment decision than any PDP governor in Nigeria. Here's the number that puts this in perspective. In the 12 months since Wike became FCT minister, the FCT's capital allocation in the federal budget increased by 34%, the single largest proportional increase of any ministry. In the same 12-month period, the average FAC payouts to Northeast states dropped by 8.2% in real terms. Those 2 numbers are not a coincidence. They are the financial architecture of the fight you are watching play out through political attacks and public statements. Now, I want to be fair. Let me give you the strongest possible argument from the other side, because it deserves to be heard properly before it is dismantled. Wike's defenders, and he has serious, intelligent defenders, will tell you this analysis is overcomplicated, that the simpler explanation is the correct one. Wike attacks people. That is his political personality. He attacked Atiku, he attacked Fubara, he attacked Rotimi Amechi, the man who was effectively his political godfather. This is not a man running on a 12-step grand strategy every time he opens his mouth. This is a man who runs on conflict as a tool, and Bala Mohammed likely crossed him or failed to show the right level of deference at the right moment, and Wike reacted. The aggression is real. The timing may simply be when the provocation happened. Reading master strategy into every outburst, they will argue, gives Wike more credit than he deserves and makes analysts look for conspiracy where there is only personality. That argument has weight, and I want you to sit with it for a moment. Here's why it ultimately does not hold. Wike's aggression is genuine. But examine every significant political fight he's picked since 2015, not just the ones that made headlines in the moment, but where each fight ended up 12 to 18 months later. Each one served a function. Each one produced a concrete outcome that benefited Wike's position. The Fubara conflict looks exactly like a personality war until you map the River State contracting network and ask who controls the key procurement decisions after Fubara is weakened. The 2022 Atiku betrayal looks like wounded pride until you look at what Wike actually walked away with from the Tinubu transition. Pattern recognition is not conspiracy theorizing. It is the most basic discipline of political analysis, and the pattern here is consistent across a decade. The second thing most Nigerians are getting wrong about this story is the frame itself. This is being covered as a PDP internal crisis, and the assumption is that it ends when PDP sort itself out before 2027.
But Wike is not operating as a PDP actor. He's operating as a federal executive with PDP contact, playing a game that crosses party lines entirely, inside institutions that will outlast whichever party wins in 2027. Keeping this inside the PDP frame makes the story about a party. The real story is about the federal budget, revenue allocation, and who controls the appointments that determine both. Now, if what I just told you surprises you, drop a comment below. I want to know what you think before we get to the part that changes everything. So where does this go from here? What should you actually be watching for? The first signal is whether Bala Mohammed responds institutionally rather than rhetorically. If he absorbs the public attack and then moves to formalize the Northern Governor's fiscal federalism demands through the National Economic Council, a joint communique, a formal position paper, something that goes on the record with signatures, he is choosing to fight on the terrain where Wike is weakest, constitutional process, not personality combat. Bala in a press war with Wike is Bala losing. Bala in an NEC process with documentation and coalition support is a different fight entirely. Watch for which version of a response he chooses. The second signal is the PDP National Working Committee. If the NWC moves to mediate publicly, it means the governors standing behind Bala have made their position clear internally and the party's remaining structures are functioning. If the NWC stays silent, if it does what it has been doing, which is essentially waiting to see who wins before it has an opinion, that silence tells you Wike's pressure is working and PDP's institutional backbone has collapsed to the point where it cannot defend one of its senior governors from a minister that technically sits in a different political space. The third and most important signal is those 3 RMAFC vacancies. If they are filled by the end of Q2 2025, watch who fills them. If the appointees have direct or indirect connections to the FCT political network or to the minister's allies in the Senate, the horizontal revenue formula review will be shaped by people whose interests are aligned with keeping the current allocation structure intact. Bala's fight, the fight that started all of this, will have been neutralized not through argument, not through NEC votes, but through appointment power, quietly, technically, legally. Now, the question this analysis opened with: why did Wike choose this moment to attack Bala Mohammed? The answer is the RMFC review, and the timing is the evidence. Bala Mohammed's single most consequential political achievement in 2025 would be forcing a horizontal revenue formula review that routes significantly more federal money towards mineral-rich northern states. That review requires a quorum. That quorum requires those 3 appointments, and Bala's ability to sustain the political pressure for those appointments depends entirely on his credibility and authority as the leading northern PDP voice remaining intact. Damage that credibility before the appointments are made, before the review table is set, before the coalition hardens, and you delay or kill the entire process without ever having to argue against it on the merits. The attack was not emotional. It was preemptive, and the timing, right at the moment Bala's fiscal federalism push was gaining quiet momentum, is not a coincidence. It is the tell. If this trajectory continues, if federal ministers can use political attacks to suppress governors advocating for constitutional revenue reform, if strategic appointment delays can neutralize policy positions without any public debate, then Nigeria in 5 years has a federal structure where the center does not just dominate, it suffocates. Where the 2027 election is not decided by voters or even by party structures, but by 3 or 4 men who control access, money, and the quiet machinery of appointments. Nigeria has been in that place before, and the cost of it was not paid by the men at the table. It was paid by everyone else. Here is the question I want you to think about and answer in the comments. If Bala Mohammed had stayed completely quiet on fiscal federalism, if he had never pushed on FAC, never built that coalition, never made that argument about solid minerals, would Wike have attacked him at all? Think carefully before you answer. If this analysis gave you clarity, share it with one person who needs to understand what's really happening in Nigeria. Like,
subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.